Hello guys, in this video I'm going to spend 100 days on my island, trying to turn it into an even cooler and more beautiful place. I'll be working hard to improve everything, step by step, mining resources, building awesome stuff, and exploring new areas, so grab some tea and enjoy the video. I want to thank everyone who supports my channel. Special thanks to those who left comments under the last video. Your words really mean a lot to me, and you're the ones who keep me going. To make sure you don't miss anything, join my Telegram channel. There you'll find more info about upcoming videos. More exciting content is on the way. Stay tuned. My first day started pretty slow. At first I remembered my sugar cane. It was just standing there, growing, while I kept passing by it, busy with other things. So I decided to finally harvest it. On one hand it seemed like a small thing, but on the other hand I knew that ahead of me was some serious work, and soon I wouldn't have time for this. After harvesting the sugar cane, it was time for something more important, preparing for a big build. In the last episode we built an awesome temple, right on the top of mountain, but if you look around, everything else looked pretty dull. I thought the temple deserved something better, so I grabbed some shulkers and started filling them with different blocks. I threw everything in there because I knew there would be a lot of work, and I wasn't sure what exactly I'd need first, so I decided to figure it out as I went. I wanted to create nice slopes, lay down paths, and add details to make everything look more natural and cozy. I knew there would be a ton of work, and I'd have to swing my pickaxe more than once to make everything look the way I imagined. I armed myself with patience, filled up the shulkers with resources, and headed up. Ahead of me was a sea of work. I was already saying goodbye to a few hours of my life, but I had no other choice, so I quickly go to work. First step I decided to take was adding stone walls, so the mountain wouldn't just look like a pile of stone, but something solid and textured. I made a few main walls to give the area some shape, so it wouldn't look so flat and artificial. With each block the area started coming to life, and although it looked a bit awkward at first, it gradually began to have a more organic feel. Of course, I couldn't just make everything perfectly flat. It would look terrible. I had to find some balance. My main goal wasn't to create a perfectly flat surface, but to keep a natural look while making everything more refined and beautiful. No one says this would be fast, but with each step I could feel the result getting closer. And even though I spent quite a bit of time on it, I wasn't afraid, because I could already imagine how it would look in the end. I have to admit, the desire to change the look of the mountain didn't come out of nowhere. It stood right across from my main base, and every day I had to look at that side. If I left everything as it was, every time I stepped out of my house, I'd see this empty, unnatural land. The temple was already in place, and it looked cool, but everything around it, it was just raw and lifeless. Every step I took, every movement on the island led through this area, so I couldn't just walk by. I had to make this place part of something bigger, something pleasing to the eye, not just an empty patch of land. After working on the slopes near the temple, I moved on to another part of the plan. I needed to clear some areas on the mountain and create large wheat fields. First of all, I thought it would look nice, as the pure stone slopes were starting to look a bit too monotonous. And secondly, such a landscape would add more naturalness and coziness to the area. If you really think about it, in the real world, many temples or shrines always had some gardens or plantations around them. People took care of them and it was part of their life. So I also wanted to bring that atmosphere into the game. So I started leveling the spots for the future field. It was quite a challenge. I had to make sure the areas look natural, not like cut out squares in the middle of the mountain. I tried to blend them into the terrain as smoothly as possible, leveling natural slopes where they looked good, and expanding the space where it made sense. I gradually solved my wheat fields, and everything around started to come to life. From the cobblestone peak, I was slowly creating a little corner of warmth. The feeling was incredible. It felt good to know that each block, each row of planted soil, had not just an aesthetic purpose, but also a piece of my soul in it. The place which not long ago annoyed me with its empty look, was now becoming a true decoration of the entire island. But not everything went as smoothly as I'd hoped. My shulker box kept filling up way too fast, with dirt, stone, wheat, you name it. Every now and then I had to pause the work and fly back to my main base, either to drop off all the extra stuff into my storage system, or to restock on the essential like dirt, bone meal, and whatever else I was running low on. It sometimes broke my flow, but those little breaks actually helped. They gave me a chance to catch my breath, take a step back, and see how the mountain was coming along. It was a nice way to check my progress and figure out what still needed work. Throughout the whole project, my tools held up surprisingly well. Thanks to unbreaking and mending, I rarely had to worry about repairs. Still, after hours of non-stop digging and building, their durability will eventually take a hit. When that happened, I'd pause everything and head over to my Enderman farm. It never took long, just a few minutes there, and all my gear was good as new. I didn't need to visit it that often, but just knowing it was there was reassuring. It meant I could focus fully on building without stressing that something might break mid-project. It didn't take long for me to realize I was going to need a ridiculous amount of dirt for all these farmland terraces. At first, I thought my storage system had it covered. I had an entire large chest packed with dirt blocks, but as soon as I started filling in the leveled areas, the dirt disappeared in no time. So I had no choice but to grab a few empty shulker boxes and head out on a little expedition. The nearest plains biome was a few hundred blocks away, and that became my go-to spot for gathering more. I picked a section of land that was flat and not particularly scenic, just to avoid missing up any nice-looking terrain nearby. With a solid efficient shovel in hand, I got to work. It was a bit repetitive, sure, but honestly it felt like a break from all the building. Just digging, listening to the ambient sounds, and slowly watching those shulkers fill up. On my way back home with the shulkers full of dirt, I stumbled upon a new structure I hadn't seen before. It was a small tree house, looking built, really unique and unlike anything I'd come across in the area. I was tempted to check it out right then, but decided to save it for later. I already had a clear plan in mind, and those sweet fields weren't going to build themselves, so I stayed focused and kept flying back home. Figured I explored the treehouse once the more urgent stuff was out of the way. Once I finished the wheat fields, I decided to switch things up and focus on the area around my base. To be honest, I wasn't exactly excited or annoyed by the idea. It was more of a neutral, this has to be done eventually, kind of task. Nothing fancy, just part of the to-do list. The jungle had been surrounding my base on the few sides for ages, so I got to work, clearing out trees, removing leaves, chopping down vines, and in some spots even flattening the terrain a bit. It wasn't anything epic or cinematic, just repetitive work, block by block. As I cleared the space, I kept thinking about how I might decorate the newly opened areas later, maybe add a few details here and there, but even without that, with every tree I took down, the whole base started to feel different. What used to be hidden away in the jungle suddenly looked open and connected. Sometimes, when you're deep into a repetitive task, it's not your body that gets tired, it's your mind. I was clearing land, flattening terrain, moving shulkers around, placing block after block, and the longer it went on, the harder it became to keep going. In moments like that, the questions always pops up, why am I even doing all this? And it's in moments like this that your support means the most. A comment, a subscription, even as simple as turned out great. They're not just words, they're what bring meaning back when it starts to fade, because knowing that someone out there is watching, waiting, and cheering you on makes it so much easier to keep going. While I keep clearing the area around the base, I also decided to do a bit of landscaping, specifically planting trees on top of the mountain. At first, I was sure I had a ridiculous amount of saplings and figured it would easily be enough for the whole thing. But once I actually got to work, reality hit fast. That huge stash of saplings vanished in no time. Within just a few minutes, I had planted every last one, and even though I originally planted to reforest a big part of the slope, I ended up covering only a teeny patch. Still, the result already looked pretty nice. The trees brought a bit of life to an otherwise rough and unfinished area, but I decided not to spread myself too thin and leave the rest of the mountain work for another episode. For now, I shifted my full focus to clearing the area for the future factory. Once the entire area was finally cleared, I headed back to my storage to get things organized. A lot had built up over time, and much of it wasn't going to be useful anytime soon. So I sorted everything out, emptied my shulker box and prepared a fresh set, this time all geared up for the factory build. I chose the materials pretty quickly. I wanted something that felt both natural and sturdy, with a bit of a technical vibe. I ended up going with the granite and bricks, in my opinion a perfect combo for industrial style build. So I headed into a nearby cave where I knew there were large granite deposits and mined it as much as I could carry. At the same time, even before heading into the cave, I had already loaded my furnaces with clay I'd been collecting during my past adventures. The furnaces were roaring, smoke rising from them, and with each passing minute, my brick supply kept growing. And finally the moment I'd been waiting for. It was time to start building the factory. To be honest, I don't even fully remember why I decided on a factory in the first place. Maybe I just wanted something big and technical looking, something that would really stand out against the natural surroundings and bring a bit of that industrial vibe to the base. Or maybe it was just one of those big creative ideas I wanted to bring to life, a way to turn this part of the island into something completely unique. All I remember is that I hesitated for a long time. At one point, I thought about building a village here, something cozy, with small cottages, little gardens, and villages along narrow paths. But every time I looked at the terrain, I realized this place just wasn't right for a village. Interestingly, I didn't have any specific idea of what this factory was supposed to look like. In fact, in all my time playing Minecraft, I never built anything like it before. It was a completely experiment. No blueprints, not even a rough plan. I just stood there on the cleared land, looking around, trying to figure out where to even begin. That's why the hardest part was figuring out the frame, because when you don't know exactly what you're building, it's tough to decide it on the size, shape, or even how tall the wall should be. At some point, I just decided to stop overthinking it and let the terrain guide me. And that's how the frame started taking shape right during the building process. As for the design, I decided not to rush it. I figured the most important thing was to lay down the foundation and define the basic outline of the building. And then, as I go, I could experiment with the details along the way. And honestly, this was one of those rare moments when building turns into a real adventure, because you're not just following a pre-made idea. You're creating it as you go. While building the factory, I ran into a pretty basic but annoying problem. I was running out of materials way faster than expected. I saw I had gathered enough granite and clay, but once I started scaling everything up, it became clear that it just wasn't going to be enough. So I had to pause the construction from time to time and head back into the caves to mine more granite and clay, then smelt it all in the furnaces again. Speaking of furnaces, I quickly realized I didn't have nearly enough of them. I didn't want to sit around for hours waiting on each new batch of bricks to smelt, so I decided to upgrade the system a bit. I added a few more furnaces to speed things up and keep everything running in parallel. At that point, it basically turned into a mini factory right inside my storage room. Resources smelting, me building something in the meantime, coming back, grabbing the next batch, and diving right back into the action. Another issue, fireworks. While I was constantly flying back and forth between the caves, storage, and the construction site, my fireworks just started vanishing from the shulker box. So at night, I had to go creeper hunting to stock up on gunpowder and make sure I didn't run out of wool for my elytra. When the roof was almost finished, it was time to start working on the interior, specifically the flooring and the windows. The flooring was relatively straightforward. I picked the material, placed the blocks, and progress was immediately visible. But the windows, that's where things got tricky. As soon as I reached the point where I needed to place the glass, I realized I was almost out of sand. And it wasn't because I forgot, it's just that this island doesn't really have the kind of terrain where you can easily gather a decent amount. It's either water, jungle, and mountains everywhere. I had to grab my elytra, load up on fireworks, and fly off to distant lands, hoping to find a beach, a desert, or even a dried up riverbed with some sand. Luckily, not too far from my base, I stumbled upon a spot where sand was just lying there waiting to be collected. I gathered as much as my shulker boxes could carry, flew back home, and threw it all into the furnaces to smelt into glass. Only after that was I finally able to focus on the windows and give the factory a bit of life. Without them, it would just look like one big boring box. Those of you who seen the previous episodes probably remember the small lava farm I built at my base a while ago. It's pretty handy, you just walk up, crop it into a bucket and smelt whatever you need. Usually it was more than enough for everyday use, but this time the scale of the project was on a whole different level. It was finally time to start working on the factory's interior. At first, I honestly thought it would just be a decorative build, something atmospheric to add a bit of industrial vibe to the island. But the more I look at it, the more I started thinking, why not make it not only cool looking, but actually useful too. And that's how the idea was born, to turn the factory into a real resources processing center. I mean, if I already got all these furnaces and I'm flying through the nether for lava, why not make this place actually useful? It could be where everything gets smelt, clay, stone, sand, even food if needed. It sounded like the perfect mix of style and functionality, and I really like that idea. I started thinking about how to place the furnaces, where to put the chest with resources, and how to make it all convenient for daily use without ruining the aesthetic of the building. I wanted everything to feel balanced, both beautiful and truly functional. Once I had the first floor more or less figured out, it was time to think about what to do with the second one. That's when the idea hit me, a clay farm. Now, to be honest, there's already plenty of clay around the island. You can find it almost every cave. But the problem is, it's all scattered across different lakes and locations, and constantly flying around to gather it by hand. Yeah, not fun. I wanted to streamline the process, have all the clay in one place, easy to access, and ready to harvest and trade with villagers for emeralds. First, I headed into a cave to collect some pointed dripstone, the key ingredient for the farm. Once I got back, I immediately started building the farm. The main idea was to make it as convenient as possible, place the dirt, water it, wait, and boom, clay. I ran water across the entire farm to keep everything evenly hydrated and speed up the process of turning mud into clay. It all turned out pretty compact and efficient. And the best part, now I have a steady place to farm clay and trade for emeralds without any extra hassle. After I finished the first part of the factory, I moved on to the second section. This time the structure turned out even taller, a real giant compared to the first part. But despite the height, I didn't see any point in making 3 floors, so just like before, I decided to stick with 2. To avoid messing around with ladders or wasting time constantly going up and down, I built my go-to solution, a water elevator. I honestly use this thing in pretty much every major build, and this time was no exception. It's a simple design, super efficient, lets me zip between floors in no time, and still fits nicely with the whole industrial vibe of the factory. Once I got the elevator done, it was time to set up the second floor. I started with the flooring, of course using the same materials as in the first section, to keep everything looking consistent. Then came the question of design. I didn't want the space to feel empty, but I also didn't want to overload it with unnecessary clutter. A bunch of ideas were spinning in my head, maybe some big pipes, fake machinery, tool shelves, or even a small technical room tucked into the corner. After finishing the frame for the second floor, I decided to hold off on building it out any further and headed back down to the first floor instead. I wanted to get the level fully completed, polish it and perfect. On the first floor of this section of the factory, I decided to build a full-on lava farm. While working on the factory, I really loved how badly I was running out of cauldrons. I just couldn't smelt resources fast enough. I was constantly waiting for lava to build up, so I figured enough with the delays. It was time to create a proper smelting room. I built a whole bunch of furnaces so I could kick off smelting different materials at any time without any delays. I organized everything to be super accessible and as efficient as possible. No more running back and forth or waiting around. By the way, it took so much iron to make all those furnaces that I used up literally everything I had. Even the iron I hadn't smelted yet had to be pulled out from the storage, melted down and put to work, but the result was totally worth it. Now it's a real smelting hub. After that, I went back to working on the second floor and decided to build a dining area for the workers. I wanted to bring a bit of coziness into this massive industrial building, so I set up a small break zone with benches, tables and even some decorations. By the way, every time I flew back to my main base, I noticed Endermen were actively tearing up the ground near my waterfall. They had pulled out a bunch of blocks and it was really starting to get annoying. So, to finally get rid of this problem, I decided to light up the entire area properly. Hopefully now no unwanted guest will show up there anymore. A lot of time had passed since I started building, and I finally felt like the factory was nearing completion. So much work had gone into it, from the main frame to the tiniest decorative details. At the stage, I returned to the dining area on the second floor, where just a few finishing touches remained: editing lighting, placing tables and benches, and setting up interior elements to make it feel like real break space for workers. It was a nice feeling, knowing that soon this massive project would finally be complete, but the longer I looked at the nearly finished building, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The factory felt a bit disconnected from its surroundings. And then it hit me. Many real-life factories have bodies of water nearby, sometimes as part of their technical systems, other time as a natural feature that complements the landscape. So I decided to do something similar with mine, and began clearing the area nearby. That's where I planned to create the artificial lake. The land was uneven and overgrown, so I had to level it out, dig, fill in holes, and shape the lake's outline to make it look natural. I added a decorative pipe on the side of the factory, as if it were connected to the water. And finally, after 19 days, I managed to finish building a proper workplace for your body. But now it was time to check out a mysterious structure I had accidentally spotted while digging up dirt. As I approached, I started listening closely to the sounds around me. Suddenly, a zombie came charging at me, with a bone in its mouth. I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, my bow was fully upgraded. I took the shot, expecting it to knock him back like usual, but the arrow didn't do anything. And in that moment, I genuinely freaked out. After finally taking down the zombie, I figured the safest way to loot this place was to break in through the roof. It seemed like the least risky option. Going in through the main entrance would probably trigger a full-blown mob ambush. When I got inside, I saw that coming from the roof was the right choice. It wasn't an empty building. Some skeletons saw me and started shooting arrows, but they weren't very strong, so I beat them easily. In the end, I can say that the structure wasn't too hard to raid, especially with good gear and a careful plan. The thing that surprised me the most is that there were no spawners inside. The mob just showed up when I got close. That made me wonder, will they keep spawning every time I come near, or was one raid enough to stop them from appearing again? As for the loot, it was pretty average. Nothing amazing, but not totally useless either. You can find a few useful items, but overall there weren't as many chests as I expected. After coming back home from the raid, the first thing I did was sort all the loot. I organized everything into a chest and just burned the stuff I didn't need. Then I noticed my tools and armor were pretty worn out, so I didn't wait and headed straight to the end. After fixing my gear, I decided it was time to make a new bow. The old one was almost broken and could fall apart any moment. I grabbed a bow from storage and started picking the right enchantments for it. To my surprise, everything went super smoothly. The books I needed showed up right away. Just a few minutes later, I had a brand new, fully enchanted bow in my hands, ready for more adventures. In the last few days, I decided to spend my time searching for the Raider Mansion. To do this, I needed to find a village. In order to get the coordinates of the mansion from the cartographer, I set off on a long journey, flying past familiar places and some structures we had already explored in previous episodes. On the way, I was lucky enough to find a biome with cherry blossoms. I had been wanting to find it for a while, as I need saplings of those trees for future decorations. And finally, after a long journey, I came across a village. After saving a villager from a zombie, I made him a cartographer, and like a true barbarian, I walled him in so he wouldn't escape. I hope he wasn't too offended by me. Just as I was ready to trade, I suddenly remembered that I forgot to bring paper with me, so I had to take to the skies again and fly around searching for the sugar cane. I gathered enough, returned it, and after a few trades, I maxed out the cartographer's level. However, as luck would have it, he didn't sell the map to the raiders mentioned. I decided to buy a map to the trial palace from him and at least explore it. After all, I put in so much effort. In the trial palace, nothing too unusual awaited me. A classic challenge for an experienced player. I ran through the corridors, fought mobs, carefully examined the decorated pots in search of any valuable loot, and of course, collected the keys scattered throughout the building. After looting the trial palace, I headed to the abandoned subway. We explored it in previous episodes, so most of you won't see anything new here. I had a few days left, so I thought, why not spend them looting chests? I ended my big adventures the same way I started it, calmly gathering sugar cane. Friends, as you may have noticed several times throughout this video, my English is not very good. It's really hard for me, and I spend 3 times more time on the English voiceover than on the one in my native language. But despite this, I'm trying to speak with more confidence in each new video, so I hope you'll understand. This was your Namin. See you next time.